For 8 years, the global music industry watched the architects at SM Entertainment build an infinite, expanding NCT universe. Enter NCT Wish. For 2 years, their mission was to weaponize a manufactured innocence while navigating the cold reality of the industry. Learning how to love in the shadow of the last NCT universe. The members' transition from trainees to idols began in the reality survival show of NCT Universe LAST ART. Unlike earlier units, these boys had to fight for a spot on TV. Sion, Riku, Yushi, Jaehee, Ryo, and Sakuya were essentially strangers brought together by a shared ambition to represent the final expansion of the NCT concept. At this stage, their love was a transaction. You earned it by being perfect and outlasting the person next to you. The training period was overseen by internal SM mentors and evaluators, placing the boys under a microscope before they even had a group name. They were pushed to master the complex, high-performance Neo style while maintaining a sense of approachability that the Wish concept required. This era was defined by Hands Up, a high-energy track that functioned as their pre-debut introduction to the world. The song and its subsequent showcase tour across Japan served as a stress test for a lineup that was still learning how to synchronize their movements and their personalities. The impact of this period was immediate, as fans began to attach themselves to the last unit of a legendary lineage. However, the ambition required to survive a survival show is a lonely kind of eros. It is a love for the goal rather than a love for the collective. The boys did well, but they were not yet a family. They were a team of 6 individuals who had survived a show, and the cracks in that system were about to show before they could even officially debut. Just as things were picking up, they hit a massive reality check. On the 2nd of October 2023, Jungmin left the group for health reasons. The loss of a member before the story even officially started was the first proof that their path would not be clean or easy. The internal impact of Jungmin's departure was profound, as it forced the remaining 6 to confront the fragility of their positions. The wish they were selling to the public was one of pure optimism and bright futures, but the reality behind the scenes was one of sudden vacancy. They had to relearn their choreography, redistribute vocal lines, and mask the anxiety of losing a brother while maintaining the Cupid image the company had designed for them. It was a premature lesson in the cost of the dream they had just fought to win. This changed the group's DNA. They were no longer the 7-member powerhouse envisioned during LAST ART, but a more resilient 6-member unit, a narrative turning point that grounded their concept. They were now a group that understood exactly what it felt like to have a wish go unfulfilled. With the loss of Jungmin behind them, the group moved toward their official debut at the legendary SM Town Live 2024 Tokyo Dome. This was the moment the Cupid concept was officially introduced to the world, framing the members as messengers of love and positivity. The debut single, Wish, was recorded in both Korean and Japanese, signaling their dual market strategy and their role as the bridge between the NCT brand and a new generation of listeners. The visual concept for the Wish music video featured the members as youthful, supernatural entities tasked with bringing people together. The choreography was intricate but emphasized a sense of ease and joy, hiding the thousands of hours of rigorous training required to make it look effortless. At this stage, they were performing the idea of love. It was a concept they were giving to the audience without yet fully understanding the depth of the commitment required to sustain it. The reception was a testament to the power of the NCT brand and the charm of the new members. Wish topped the Oricon Daily Single Chart and the Apple Music Top Albums Chart in Japan, while their Korean promotions earned them their first music show wins.
NCT Wish!
But underneath the success, the members were still adjusting to the life of a public idol. They were the final students of NCT University, and though they had passed their first exam, the hardest part of their education was still to come. The honeymoon phase of debut quickly transitioned into the demanding schedule with the release of Songbird. Following the massive success of their debut, the group was tasked with proving that their popularity wasn't a random fluke. Songbird represented a shift toward a more focused and polished sound, emphasizing the group's vocal growth and their ability to handle more complex, performance-heavy concepts. The music video and styling for Songbird leaned into the theme of delivery, with the members acting as couriers of hope. The choreography was faster and more demanding than Wish, requiring a level of synchronization that showed their deepening bond. This era was about love as duty, the realization that being a member of NCT meant showing up every single day, regardless of fatigue or pressure. They were officially part of the SM ecosystem. And that's not even the most insane part. While the group was reaching new heights in sales and visibility, the mental and physical toll was beginning to manifest. The impact of Songbird solidified their fan base, known as Wizen, but it also set the stage for a period of extreme endurance that would test the group's very own foundation. As the group prepared for their next major release, the announcement of Steady was met with a mix of excitement and sudden concern. On the 24th of September 2024, the group released their first mini album, which was intended to be a celebration of their growth. The Steady era was visually characterized by a retro, schoolboy aesthetic that emphasized the first love feeling. The music video was a bright, nostalgic journey. However, shortly after the release, it was announced that Riku would be taking a hiatus due to health reasons. The title Steady suddenly became a mandate rather than just a song title. The remaining 5 members had to reblock their choreography and cover Riku's iconic rap and vocal parts. The group had to stay steady while one of its most vital pillars was absent. The impact of this era was a deepening of the bond between the members and their fans. The Wish concept of optimism was put to the ultimate test. This was the transition from the innocence of Wish to the resilience of Steady. The 5 members carried the weight of the 6, giving every form of love they had to ensure that the light didn't go out while Riku was away. The transition into the winter of 2024 was defined by the release of their first Japanese full album, Wishful. With Riku still on hiatus, the group faced their most grueling promotional cycle to date. This was pure eros, the act of giving love and energy to the world when your own cup is half empty. They traveled between cities, performed on end-of-year stages, and maintained a grueling schedule, all while a 16.6% void sat in the middle of their hearts. The Wishful album featured a blend of new Japanese tracks and Japanese versions of their Korean hits. The concept was cozy and festive, designed to provide comfort to the fans during the holiday season. But for the 5 active members, it was an era of pure endurance. They had to be the cupids for an entire fandom while they themselves were grieving the temporary loss of their teammate. Every performance was a sacrifice of energy and emotion given with no immediate guarantee of Riku's return. It was even an endurance test for their fans, having to temporarily adapt to someone they just met. The impact of Wishful was a commercial success, reaching the top of the Oricon charts once again. But more importantly, it established the group's character. They proved they could carry the NCT brand alone, not simply the youngest unit anymore, but a group that had survived the void. They were learning that love isn't just a feeling you have when things are easy. Love is the choice you make to keep going when things are broken. But what happens next completely flips the game, with the announcement of the spring comeback PopPop. Came with the news the fans had been waiting for. Riku was back. In April 2025, the group was finally whole again. The return of Riku transformed the group's energy from one of endurance to one of explosion. The title PopPop was a literal representation of the joy and energy that returned to the unit the moment their sixth member stepped back into the practice room. The music video for PopPop was a colorful, high-energy celebration, utilizing fast cuts and vibrant graphics to mirror the group's restored spirit. The choreography returned to its full, six-man complexity, with Riku resuming his role as a key performance anchor. This was the first true moment of Anteros, which means requited love. The love the five members had given to the fans and to the group during the hiatus was finally returned to them through Riku's presence and the overwhelming support of the fans. The impact of PopPop was a total revitalization of the NCT Wish brand. They saw a massive jump again in their digital charting and physical sales, but the real victory was internal. They had survived the void and come out stronger. They were a single unit that had earned their happiness. The education was progressing, and the final students were beginning to understand the full spectrum of their concept. With the group finally whole and their resilience proven, the autumn of 2025 brought color. This era was a departure from the messengers of love concept towards something more internal and identity-driven. As they moved further into their second year, the members began to explore their own individual colors with their specific strengths, vocal tones, and personal styles that made the group more than just an NCT unit. The Color music video used sophisticated visual metaphors for identity, moving away from the Cupid props toward more artistic and abstract styling. The music was more experimental, blending the group's signature brightness with the more complex R&B influences of the NCT lineage. This was love as self-actualization. They realized that to love the group fully, they had to understand and love who they were as individuals first. This era also marked a subtle shift in the group's leadership and presence. Boa, who had been their anchor and producer from day one, began to step into the background, allowing the boys more autonomy in their performances and variety content. They were finding their own hues, preparing for a future where they would have to be their own guides. In early 2026, it was officially announced that Boa would be stepping down as the executive producer for NCT Wish. Since the last art days, Boa had been the group's primary architect, mentor, and protector. Her departure right before their first full album felt, to the public, like the scaffolding being taken down before the building was fully tested. The background of this departure was one of graduation. Boa had finished the task she set out to do. She had taken 6 boys and turned them into a self-sustaining unit. While the fans felt a sense of exposure and fear for the group's future, the narrative within the group was one of independence. They were being told they were ready. The motherly figure wasn't leaving them behind, she was letting them go because they had finally learned how to walk. The immediate impact was a surge of pressure. The group was now the only NCT unit without a dedicated legendary mentor active in their daily production. As the final lesson in maturity, they learned that love often requires the strength to let go of the things that once protected you. All of the lessons, with the ambition of Last Art, the heartbreak of Jungmin, the endurance of Riku's hiatus, and the graduation from Boa. All of it finally converged on the 20th of April 2026 with the release of their first full album, Ode to Love. The album was the culmination of an 8-year story, not just for the group, but for the entire NCT expansion project. Titled after the two Greek gods of love, the album was divided into two halves, Eros and Anteros. The title track, Ode to Love, anchored the project as a new UK garage dance pop anthem. It carried a wistful melody that perfectly captured their mission. A sincere desire to spread warmth in what can often feel like a cold, cynical world. But the album's depth went far beyond the lead single. Two acted as their sonic manifesto, a hybrid pop track with intense verses that exploded into a string orchestra chorus, signaling their intent to break past every limit. They leaned into their experimental neo roots with Feel the Beat, while Voyage served as a modern rock ballad dedicated to the fans, conveying a message of hope and determination to the Wizen who stayed by their side. Even the more playful tracks like Sticky showed their versatility, using a bossa nova guitar and hip-hop beat to metaphorically compare their bond to something as sweet and inseparable as mango sticky rice. The production of Ode to Love was the group's thesis defense. They were involved more than ever in the creative process, ensuring that the lyrics and themes reflected their actual lived experiences. The impact was a definitive statement for the K-pop industry. Closing the circle on the NCT Universe, the group proved that the final students had actually become the masters of the concept. They had learned to give love when they were empty, and they finally knew how to accept it back. The album was the evidence that these 6 boys had finally become a family. NCT Wish entered the industry as the closing chapter of a massive, ambitious experiment. They were the final students, the youngest siblings who carried the weight of everything that came before them. Everything the NCT brand has built. But as they stand here today, it is clear they were never just a footnote. Their journey was a crash course in what it actually takes to survive this industry. They learned how to lose, how to wait, how to return, and how to stand alone. The 8-year NCT Universe ends with a quiet, earned maturity. By the time they reached Ode to Love, the wish had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone expected. It wasn't fulfilled by fame or awards, though they had both. It was fulfilled by the 6 boys in the room who realized that the love they were looking for was already in their hands. They are the final unit, the last ones standing, and the only ones who can say they saw the whole story through to the end.